I'd like everyone to take a second and just quickly in your head, count to 10. In the 10 seconds that just passed by, a child somewhere in this world suffered abuse. Had you waited for 2 minutes, a child would have been raped. That's right. We still live in a world where children all over the place still incur abuse. We live in a world where not every child can grow up in a safe, peaceful, loving, and supportive home. That, alas, is no novelty. Child abuse has plagued us longer than we can remember, and unless we change our course of action, it's not going anywhere. Millions will continue to suffer, thousands will continue to die, and those who survive will never live the same way again. Today, I'm going to tell you why child abuse is a big problem and why it's a problem that needs to be addressed. I'm also going to share with you some reliable and tested solutions and what you can do to contribute to those solutions. Child abuse is defined as any act that harms or impairs the health, development, and dignity of a child. Forms of abuse include physical, psychological, emotional, familial, neglect, exploitation, among other forms of abuse. I think it's wrong for people to assume that child abuse only applies to physical harm. That, of course, is untrue. You don't have to touch a child to hurt one. In fact, according to a report by the World Health Organization, for the most part, the effects and consequences of child abuse are psychological. In fact, the same report shows how non-physical types of abuse can also lead to an increase of substance abuse and criminal activity for the child in the future. Children are molested, beaten upon, and hated every day in many different ways. The effects of child abuse are horrific, and for many oftentimes they stay in the child for many years. Besides the immoral implications of hurting a child, according to the World Health Organization, child abuse also impairs the physical security and mental stability of children. For instance, children who are abused are more likely to engage in substance abuse, criminal activities, they're more likely to suffer depression, they're more likely to behave aggressively, they're more likely to develop social awkwardness, and they don't do too well in school because it's very hard to excel academically, especially when you have all this distraction back home. The same report also shows how 1 in 3 children who are abused will become abusers themselves. But perhaps the most discouraging statistics of all is the one given by the Child Welfare Information Gateway, which states that children who are abused are 9 times more likely to commit acts of crime in the future. Is this really the future we want to leave for our children? And plus, the consequences of child abuse doesn't just stop at the child. The same report shows how in the United States, society must incur a total of $127 billion of financial costs because of child maltreatment and child deaths. These expenses include increases in the usage of this nation's healthcare system, criminal justice system, prison system, and as well as juvenile system. Child abuse exists from country to country, and it's frankly an issue that we've tried to deal with before. For instance, here in the United States, all 50 state legislatures have some sort of statute that criminalizes some form of abuse. In addition, all 50 states also require mandatory reporting, which basically means some people, when they see any sign that a child might have been abused, they have to report it to authorities right away. The United Nations even passed a resolution signed by 140 countries internationally and formally battling child abuse, however, to no success. According to the International Assault Prevention Center, 72 million boys and 150 million girls under the age of 18 are sexually abused every year. In addition, 40 million children under the age of 15 are abused every year. Although that child abuse is a bad problem in America, I think it's important for us to not call it an American problem because it's a world problem. And according to UNICEF, in fact, there are over 194 countries with history and patterns of child abuse offenses, and these are just countries that were investigated upon. Here are some of the top offenders. For example, in India, according to the Indian Times, over the last decade, they saw a 336% surge in the number of child sexual abuse reports. In South Africa, the statistics is even worse. A child is raped every 3 minutes. So why is child abuse still a problem? Well, for one, the government has not done enough, especially here in the United States. A report by the Child Advocacy Group revealed that federal laws regarding child protection is very weakly enforced. In fact, the Federal Commission on Child Abuse once reported and once called federal laws regarding child abuse as, quote, a shame to the country. Basically, federal regulators haven't been exercising their full oversight power, and as a result, state compliance has been minimal. Additionally, states haven't been given the motivation to act on child abuse on state level. Why should they do it if the federal government doesn't do it? The same report by the Federal Commission also revealed how in the last 6 years, there were 800 cases of murders because of abuse in situations where law enforcement officers were actually aware of what was going on. And I think that's both discouraging and disgraceful, considering two things. One, had the laws been stricter and had the laws been more strictly enforced, those innocent children could still be with us today. The American Society on Children reports that in 2015, the United States experienced 7.2 million cases of child abuse reports. That's an increase from 2014, which was 6.6 million. That's a 600,000 increase in 1 year, and I think that says a lot about how weak the laws are in this country. Oh, sorry. Two other primary reasons of why child abuse remains a big issue is, according to the Australian government, they released a report that outlined two fundamental reasons. One is that parents lack the education they need to be able to discipline and raise their child without necessarily hurting them. And two, there's still some parts of this world, there's still a cultural acceptance of child abuse where parents actually think it's okay, that it's socially acceptable. In my home country, the public school system allows children to be caned and actually humiliated for punishment, and I think that says a lot. So what can we do? Well, as I said earlier, the laws have not worked to the extent that we want them to. However, that does not mean that there is no room for improvement. For instance, the state of Pennsylvania recently went through a child abuse reform. Basically, the state's task force on child abuse expanded the definition of child abuse under law. They also created stricter punishments for people who don't report when the children is abused. They updated record keeping to make sure that people who have violated the system don't violate the system again. They also expand protection so that people who abuse children, not only caregiver but parents, but other people are also liable under the law. Before these laws were enacted, child abuse in Pennsylvania reflected government failure at its worst. In fact, a child abuse expert from Bridgewater State University once described what was going on in Pennsylvania as disgraceful. For years, many children were neglected, and they were neglected and ignored as law enforcement officers turned a blind eye. But ever since these reforms were passed, there was hope. There was actually improvement. And so one of the solutions that I'm proposing for everyone is that the United States and other countries mimic Pennsylvania's success. And what you can do about this is to call your legislators, call your representatives, because no matter what country you're from, remember that this is not an American problem. Your home countries are bound to have child abuse. And Pennsylvania proved once more that stricter laws do work and that change and reform can work. And so your voice really counts. Your contribution really counts. I know that sometimes legislation isn't passed and that sometimes it's very hard to negotiate with your lawmakers. Thankfully, there are already two organizations working on a less complicated situation. Those two organizations are the WHO, and they're working with the International Society for Child Prevention. They recognize that some laws aren't strict enough, and so they're working towards building guideline programs, helping nations enact the best policies to deter child abuse. However, a more invasive option requires more than mere guidance. The PCA here establishes solutions that are more direct in fashion, and what I basically mean by that is that they have these family programs where they actually send workers into homes to check on the conditions of children, to educate parents on how to discipline their child without harming them, to let them know about the development stages so they can better prepare and train themselves. They also develop family resource centers where children and family can just come together, find support, find resources they need to give their children the best environment. So in conclusion, as the UN High Commissioner on Human Rights once put, no society can claim to be immune from child abuse. There are three viable and tested solutions, and we are given today the chance to deal with them. So let's get out of our comfort zones and let's leave no more child behind. Thank you.